what I didn't know then that I know now is that crazy people never want to be seen as crazy.
Sure.
Like, those are the people that do not want to talk to a doctor. Those are the people that will fight you tooth and nail about whether they're insane. The people that are willing to talk to a doctor are not insane.
I think psychological health is something that we struggle with in our community. It is so much of the crime you see, or especially with, so many of it is by children from broken homes.
Yeah.
Many of them would be on a spectrum of, with mental health problems, learning disabilities, autistic spectrums now.
Yeah.
And that's rarely enters the conversation. Welcome to Above the Legal Limit. I'm your host, Justin Chopin, business owner, lawyer, dad, world's best husband, traveler, and adventure seeker. On this podcast, we mix business with pleasure. We'll dive into growth strategies, entrepreneurial adventures, the business of law, and prove that business isn't boring. So let's get ready, because we are going above the legal limit. Welcome to Above the Legal Limit. Very special guest today, Julie Tizzard. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Did I say your last name right?
Tizzard is how
I know.
say it.
As soon as I said it, I realized that I messed that up.
Plenty of people say it like that, so it's fine.
I feel like I've known your name, but I've never like said it out loud. I've certainly read it.
Right.
But very esteemed colleague here at the bar. Criminal defense is what I know you for, right? And so, what kind of criminal work do you do? What kind of crimes do you commit, or do your clients commit?
I represent people from all walks of life in every sort of crime that you could imagine, from, business people and doctors in federal court to your neighbor that gets a DWI, everything.
Okay. So the one thing we don't do is criminal work. I thought for a second, because we hired an ex-prosecutor. I was going to say ex-con, but an ex-prosecutor.
Right.
He knows a lot about crime. And I thought maybe we would kind of branch, but we don't. We're going to stick to what, we know. I've often made the joke, like, if you want to go to jail, you should hire me. If you're like, I don't have any prospects right now, and actually being a ward of the state would be, a relief for you, then come on in. I helped one person out. The kid was breaking into cars to steal money to buy marijuana from a drug dealer he met in rehab. So I was like, there you go. That's when I learned rehab is not the best necessarily. And so, I was helping him out, and I didn't even know where to stand. I felt like maybe I was out of place there. I was the criminal. I truly, it's because it's different. It's completely different.
I had a similar experience in civil court. The one time I was in civil court, I had a criminal case with a emergency eviction for a business that was related.
Okay.
And I didn't know what I was doing, so you have to file stuff immediately.
Right.
I filed a reconventional demand. I don't even know if you could do that or not. I tried to get a continuance because I had a big, high-profile case going on in federal court, and the other lawyer wouldn't give me one. So I remember filing a motion to recuse him because I was going to call him as a witness. And I just did everything wrong, but it worked out perfectly because the judge was a very stern judge. And I remember the other lawyer thought he was mad at me, and I could tell he was amused. He wasn't mad at me. Right. I was like, okay, we're going to do a hearing. Let's do it. I think if something said that you're going to do it, but in civil court, they don't really do stuff. They just postulate a lot and don't do it. And I was ready to do it.
Yeah.
And so, but it worked out great because can we just go in chambers? He's like, can't we just work this out? And then the other lawyer started taking up for me when he thought he was mad at me because he really shouldn't have been there. He really was a witness, honestly. Anyway, it was interesting, but I had no idea what I was doing either.
The old pretrial.
Yeah.
The old pretrial. There's some, when I used to do domestic work, I don't do that anymore. I'm off the stuff.
Yeah. Oh.
I can't take it.
Yeah.
But in the early days when I started the firm, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do.
Right.
And you take the cases you can take.
Yeah.
And so as much as I hated doing it, it did, help bring this all together. And that was when I learned about the pretrial. Before that, I had done commercial litigation and insurance defense, and I've represented, drilling companies in corporate America. We never really pre-tried all that much stuff. You'd have a pre-trial conference. Right. But no, it's some of these, sort of practice areas that you just go, we'd spend the whole day pre-trying it.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there thinking, this is never going to end. We're never going to have a resolution of this.
Yeah.
And then And then the judge would say, well, doesn't look like you guys are going to resolve this today. We're going to have to get you a date to come in. We're just going to have to argue this. And I'm thinking, wait, no, that's what today was for.
Right.
I was ready today. I was ready. I had you were going to get the best show of your life.
Right.
I didn't know we were going to spend 6 hours talking about can we just use that as the argument? You just rule however you want to rule at this point.
Yeah.
You've got it all,
Yeah.
That's the pretrial. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
But
pretrial.
I'm hardwired for efficiency too, which is one reason why I do criminal stuff, because I find our pretrials don't last 6 hours. They last like maybe an hour, right? And it's like everyone is very transparent. Like they have to give you all their stuff. And
Sure.
You give them your stuff and you try to resolve it. Like I don't think I could be a civil lawyer because I don't understand why people go out of their way to avoid answering questions
Drives
and
me
giving
crazy.
over stuff. And
That's because there's no constitutional right.
Right.
Well, on the civil side, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
so we talk about this a lot when we're talking about insurance and levels of insurance.
Right.
And so one thing defense lawyers love to do is you'll ask them, what are all the layers of insurance coverage you have? And you'll get a response that says something like, see attached.
Right.
And what they're doing is they're banking on the fact that you're not going to really read it, you're not going to see what's attached, and you're not going to notice that a deck page of the underlying policy doesn't mean that there isn't still $10 million in a tower somewhere.
Right.
It's just the $1 million deck page. And
Right.
so on our side, we have to fight tooth and nail with defense counsel to,
Right.
So, well, no, I'm never going to stop asking you. I'm pretty sure there's more insurance,
Right.
right? I mean, it's a pretty big company. Most
Yeah.
of the time, you're not walking around with $1 million CGL. There could be, excess. There could be umbrellas, or like I said, like a tower. But yeah, the lawyers on both sides are completely obstreperous.
Right.
And the reason they're that way is because they get away with it.
Well, they also make money by billing by the hour.
Yeah, that too.
But it's inefficient, though, to me. So I think it would be maddening to me if I had to do that. To be honest,
I think in the criminal world, you just can't get away with it, right? Well,
No.
we're still seeing cases from the Connick era, right, where there's this, undisclosed, what was it? I don't even know because I don't do criminal work. I can just start saying words like Brady. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I was there at the end of the Connick era. I can say that, like, by the time I got there, everybody knew what Brady was. But I think the real issue back then was that they just had a bunch of young lawyers like they do now, and nobody really knew what it was. It wasn't that people were intentionally trying to hide things. They just didn't really understand exactly what it was and what it wasn't.
One of the first pieces of advice I got as a young lawyer was from my dad's law partner, Chip Wagar, and he said, never confuse malice for incompetence. And it's one of those pieces that I sort of always try to remember, and I think it's good advice, and I always try to give to the guys here. Don't assume, now they might be,
Right.
but don't assume that it's for malice. A lot of times it's just incompetence.
Right.
They're not paying attention. They're
Right.
going too fast, and they haven't edited it, or they're having someone else do it, and they're not reviewing it afterwards.
Right.
So it was I always think that's sound advice. So what are some of the big cases? So I always preface this, and we can edit this at any point. So if you're like, Justin, you can't ask me that.
Right.
Don't worry about it. We'll cut it out. But like, what are some of the big high profile cases in the criminal world that we should have our eye on right now?
That's a really good question. I don't really know because I haven't really been paying attention to high profile cases in the criminal world at the moment. Like, you mean nationally?
No, just like locally. Is it,
So there was a
some
case,
big trends in New Orleans?
I mean, there was one case that's not really out of New Orleans, but it's a case I handled on appeal and got overturned on appeal. The AG's office is very insistent on retrying this case, and it baffles me I don't understand, like, what we're dealing with. I suspect we're dealing with something that's not on the face of whatever this case is, right? It was the Melanie Curtin case. I don't know if you're familiar with this case out of Denham Springs.
I'm not. What happened?
So this was a woman that had never been arrested before. She was like a 40-year-old single mom of 2 teenage boys. And she gets brought into the AG's office. I don't know if you remember the Denny Perkins, the deputy in Livingston Parish that was like all over the news for having child pornography and all this stuff.
Yes.
Okay. So Livingston Parish is not a giant place, okay? So she's there. She gets called in. This video surfaces of her having a threesome with a married couple, and she has no recollection of this event. Neither does the wife, purportedly, in the video, right? So neither one of them have any recollection of this. This guy is known to drug women and use his wives to lure women over and drug them. But somehow she gets charged with rape, okay?
That's insane.
It is insane. And given a life sentence. She was given a life sentence that I got overturned in the First Circuit.
The accusations that she raped one of the married couple.
Wife.
I was going to say, I can speak for all men here.
Right.
And everyone's going to say, Justin, this is ridiculous.
Right.
You have no business saying this, and we're on a recorded line. But I speak for all men when we are in agreement that there's no such thing as as a reverse rape.
Right.
Right. Women do not rape men.
Well,
and
right.
There, I said it.
And all of this is part of the public record.
Give me all your negative
all
comments.
Part of
I'm
the
ready
appeal,
for it.
So I could talk about it because it's all part of the public
Right.
record. But the really strange thing about this is it's just so baffling to me. I just don't understand how she ended up there, why they're insistent on retrying it. I think that, I don't know, it's really crazy. Anyway, so on the evening in question, she brings her kid over there. They ask her to come over 5 times, right? She's in a relationship with her husband, and her relationship is kind of strained. He's sort of an alcoholic. He's been out at the game. She's maybe thinking about trying to, leave until he goes to sleep or whatever. So she goes over there with her kid. They're like, oh, we're going to watch a movie. She offers to pick up their daughter at the football game and bring their daughter home. They're like, no, she's, whatever. So she comes over. She has no recollection of this incident happening at all, right? And it came out later that the wife apparently has done this before. Normally that wouldn't come in under the rape shield statute, but under these particular facts, she had a right to defend herself, and the First Circuit said that should have come in because, she has no memory of it. The purported victim is saying that she has no memory of it, but the purported victim has engaged in, recorded group sex multiple times, okay?
And ordinarily that would be precluded
under the rape shield.
Is that forgive my ignorance here, is that a new statute? Or is
so no, the rape shield statute has been along for a long time, and it's there for a good reason.
Right,
it's
sure.
you can't be
promiscuous, therefore.
Therefore you're, whatever. But in this particular situation, she was asked if this was something that she would ever do on the stand, and the purported victim said no, that she would never do anything like this, right? And what the jury heard is I would never engage in recorded group sex. And so the First Circuit said that should have come in.
It's just impeachment evidence at that point, right?
Well, right. But then it becomes, okay, in the new trial, what if they don't ask her that question? Does it still come in as not being truthful before? That's still something that will be decided if and when they retry this case. So that's that's a case that, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know any prosecutor in the entire country, once they found out that their purported victim that never even came forward and said she was a victim, you told her she was a victim, okay, had done this before, would still pursue this, right? I don't understand.
I can't make sense of that either.
I was is it because it's lesbian sex and we got this new religious right thing happening in Louisiana where
well, what about the husband that's in the video?
He's prosecuted and in jail for 100 years for a bunch of other things. He did not. They dropped this case against him though, and they're still insistent on going after this woman. So purportedly, they're supposed to be retrying it in October. We'll see if that actually happens, but you should keep your eyes on that because it's
That's bizarre.
Yeah. It is bizarre.
I will keep my eyes on that. So we started this. We did a Jean-Benet Ramsey podcast. Yes. And I'm not following the Jean-Benet Ramsey. And so, but a couple of people here, my marketing coordinator and my bookkeeper I walked in, they had pages and pages of it. I had to go buy all new legal pads.
They went through all the legal pads. I listened to the whole thing.
It's interesting.
Yes.
Right? And so now they're telling me I have to watch for the resentencing hearing on the Menendez brothers. Because apparently that's the big thing that's happening right now.
Right.
Are you following that too?
So I haven't watched that. I remember when that was going on then, and I've gotten clips of what's come out since then. And I think that would be a very interesting thing to watch because I think, the truth, defense attorneys haven't always done their job to present their clients accurately to the prosecution. And I think that our whole job is to humanize our clients and to know our clients and to understand why our clients do what they do if they happen to be guilty, because there are people I represent that are not guilty, right? But it's like understanding how they got to that position and humanizing them. And I think whoever their lawyers were maybe didn't do the best job of doing that. I mean, I remember
They were
watching
pretty young,
that.
right?
Yeah, and I remember watching that. I don't know how old I was when that came out, but thinking, wow, horrible. The media always plays like a big role in a lot of things, and they don't always get it right. And most of the time, they don't get it right. They're like, how can I create the most sensational story that's going to sell the most, whatever?
Yeah, everyone's going to read.
And so they portrayed them as monsters that were just out for their parents' money and just cold-blooded killing to get the money, and they were all about the money. But it turns out, based on what I've read, that there was a whole lot of abuse and other stuff happening. And I think that would be a really interesting thing to watch.
Well, they're chomping at the bit, so we may do a Menendez series. It's interesting to see generationally how things change, right? So at that time, you see a child murder a parent, and you're like, you are a cold, calculated monster. You do not belong in society.
Right.
Today, 2025, a child murders a parent. We immediately, instinctually say, something's not right.
But that's the difference in generations,
right?
When I was a kid, like I'm Generation X, like we couldn't backtalk to parents.
Right.
We couldn't. I mean, it's just a very different way of being brought up. Now kids backtalk and do all kinds of
all
stuff.
They do. All of my kids do.
But the reason they do it is because they're not scared like we were.
They feel.
You know what I mean? And so, while it's not acceptable,
that's a good take. I never considered that. You're right. I mean, my kids don't. My kids talk back to me, no matter what I say. Anything I say, they tell me to shut up.
Yeah.
But I guess because they feel, I on the one hand, I'm a Gen X, so my inner Gen X is like, this is disrespectful. This is unacceptable behavior.
Yeah.
But but perhaps it's just they feel comfortable telling me to shut up.
Right. And
maybe,
you know what?
Maybe it's a lot. That's easier to
I
swallow.
hope my
That makes me
child
feel so
never
much
sees
better.
this, but like part of the time, he's right. Actually. Only 30% of the time, though.
The kids
the rest
are
of the
right.
time, I'm right.
The kids are right because they usually don't have a lot of skin in the game, and they're just usually they're looking at the whole thing, and they're like, well, why are you telling us no? I'm like, I don't know. I just that's what I do. Go ask your mother, and she'll tell you yes.
I remember one time when Sebastian is my child's name, when he was 5, we were running late to school, and I was like in a panic, and I was like, okay, we have to get there, whatever. And he goes, what's going to happen if we don't get there? Are they going to kick us out of school? Are we going to die? He goes, I don't think so. Like,
everything he's saying is true, but that would piss me off so bad. We're like, that's not the point.
It was like 5, so I was like, you have a point, actually. Okay.
Hurry up. Yeah.
So,
no, that's it. Yeah. That's exactly my son. My son is exactly. He's I don't like to speak things into existence because I never want like my kids to have this sort of sense that they have to do what I do. In fact, I hope in a lot of ways that they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Go do something else. I'm trying to think of whatever the last job they wanted. I can't remember what it was. My daughter wanted. I was like, well, no, don't do that. Be whoever you want to be. Just don't do that. I can't remember what it was. I remember thinking like, that's a horrible job. Don't do that. Yeah. But he's the child. He's the product of two lawyers.
Yeah.
And I could just see the cool thing about children is when they're born, you don't realize it yet because you don't know them yet. But that baby that you're holding is the same person that they're going to be for their entire life. Right. So now I understand why my son was a complete psycho as a newborn.
Yeah.
Because he's still kind of like, he's nuts. I was like, this kid's just going to be a lawyer. Right. He's just wired that way. He's not afraid to speak his mind.
Right.
He's not afraid to say, what he considers to be the truth. He's not afraid to call you out.
Yeah.
He's insanely analytical.
So is mine.
And I'm just like, all right, well, I just do something well with it. I don't know what to tell you. You don't have to do this.
Mine does not want to be a lawyer, which is good, I think. But he does. He's like, he'll always get paid more than he's worth, I have no doubt, because like he has to negotiate everything.
Yeah.
All the time. Like,
That's
but I'm like, it'll serve you well in life, but you're driving me crazy right now.
But that's where we are. We've concluded that our kids are just going to be difficult children, but that they're going to be really excellent adults.
Yeah.
And so that's our new position until someone gives us something better to hold on to.
Right.
Like, I'm sure you're going to be awesome when you're like 40.
That's what people say. I mean, they say when they're challenging when they're younger, they're very self-sufficient when they're older. So
I was a delight as a child and not challenging at all. And so I don't know. But I was also the third. And so the third child, there's a different set of
You
circumstances.
just got to hold
You
on
just
so
do
you
it.
don't get lost.
Right. You have to figure out your own way.
Yeah.
So, well, it'll be interesting to see on the Menendez what they do. I do think that there's like a shift in the public's perception of this. And what's interesting is now it's just presumed that they were like abused in a way, and that they were, what's the standard, right, for an abused spouse.
Right.
There is like an exception for that, right? Like battered spouse syndrome, I suppose. I don't know if it's, so it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out. I should start following these things, but I'm not a criminal lawyer, and that's what I keep trying to tell them. They're like, you need to talk about all these criminal issues on your show. And I was like, I don't think you understand. Like, I took one criminal course in law school. Right. And it was with a great professor who I really like. He didn't even teach us Louisiana criminal law. We took it wasn't even the ABA standard. It was like a standard that had never been, the model penal code, which has not been adopted in like any state.
I think all like criminal, I mean, as far as I know, I've only been in Louisiana, although I'm not from Louisiana. I think all criminal law is kind of the same because it's constitutional in nature. So I don't know that criminal law is different as like the civil law is.
I don't know because I don't do it.
Yeah.
But I do know when I studied for the bar exam, thinking this is really not the criminal law that I was taught.
Right.
Like specific intent.
Yeah.
Right. So under the model penal code, like you don't use those terms, and so I still to this day probably have a better grasp of a common law criminal law than I do of Louisiana's criminal law.
That was on the bar, specific intent?
The Louisiana bar does, yeah.
Wow. And so many criminal lawyers don't even know the difference between general intent and specific intent.
I don't know that I could do
good
it
that
again.
it was on there,
That's
but yeah.
back in 2007.
No,
I
but
can't make any guarantees in 2025.
It's a very important part about criminal law, but a lot of people, it gets overlooked a lot, right?
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what's one of the worst cases you've seen come through?
The worst cases I've seen come through.
We all have like that one. Back when I was doing, I do personal injury, and so I can tell you like horror stories, right? But it's like, electrocutions and
You mean worse, like the worst facts?
Yeah, the worst criminal case.
I mean, probably cases maybe that I handled as a prosecutor.
Yeah. Where you were a prosecutor in Orleans Parish?
Yeah, and so I guess I didn't handle the trial, I didn't handle the direct appeal, but I handled the post-conviction on the Antoinette Frank case.
Oh, really? So that's a hot topic, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Because they just denied her appeal
they did, yeah.
Yeah, I think they said they're like, no, she was supposed to be on death row, right?
I did call up there and talk to the AG's office about that for a minute. Yeah, she was on death row. It's just kind of an interesting situation, and now that I'm a grown-up and I have more life experience, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about all that. You know what I mean? I mean, she was I think all this is out in the public record too, but she was, severely abused as a child and maybe ended up murdering her father and burying him in the backyard. She was never charged with that. A lot of psychological issues, right? Do I know? I think most people are redeemable, and I hate to say that some people are not redeemable, but some people are so damaged that, like, I don't know if they could ever function in a society and be like, whatever. Does that mean they should be disposable? I'm not in favor of the death penalty. I wasn't in favor of the death penalty when I was a DA.
I'm not in favor of it. I don't mind. Maybe 20 years ago I wouldn't have said that out loud. I'm not in favor of the death penalty. They hired me
at the DA's office. I think I was the only person they ever hired who told them at the interview that I was not in favor of the death penalty, but because I explained why I wasn't. But I'm not going to lie to you. And the only death penalty case they ever gave me besides that one, which the issue in that case wasn't really the death penalty, it was some other little issue, right? Was a case where they wanted it to get overturned. So then they gave that to me because nobody wanted the person to get the death penalty, flipped the jury off. That's why I got the death penalty. Supreme Court found some BS reason to reverse it. And, nobody wanted him to get the death penalty. So then they gave me that case. But Antoinette Frank's case is really interesting. It's just a sad situation all the way around. I mean, the facts are horrible. She was charged with, she basically was protecting this family's restaurant out in the East with her partner, and she ended up killing the kids, execution style, killing her partner. Like, it was just kind of crazy scenario. And you know? But you look at the person, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to all of that, but I know that the issue that I dealt with was whether or not she was given the opportunity to get a sanity exam. And it turned out that our Matlock moment as the prosecutor is that she was given the opportunity. So this guy that always testified for the defense was suddenly our witness, testified for us that she was given the opportunity. What I didn't know then that I know now is that crazy people never want to be seen as crazy.
Sure.
Like, those are the people that do not want to talk to a doctor. Those are the people that will fight you tooth and nail about whether they're insane. The people that are willing to talk to a doctor are not insane. Like, that's just what I've learned. You know, it's the people that fight that label that
Right.
really have the issue, and she was one of those people. So I think there is a lot of, I just think the whole thing is sad all the way around.
Well, I think psychological health is something that we struggle with in our community. It is so much of the crime you see, or especially with, so many of it is by children
Right.
from broken homes.
Yeah.
Many of them would be on a spectrum of, with mental health problems, learning disabilities, autistic spectrums now.
Yeah.
And that's rarely enters the conversation.
So this is a perfect segue for something that I did want to talk about. For a brief stint of my career, I don't know, I guess it was around 2020 or maybe right before then, I didn't volunteer, but I was on the panel in juvenile court because they had so many cases coming in with these stolen cars and all these kids in there. They didn't have enough lawyers. So I took a bunch of cases down there. I lost a lot of money that year, but I learned a lot. I lost a lot of kids to the street. I formed relationships with kids. I learned a lot about their motivation for doing things. And you're right. There is a lot of learning disabilities and a lot of stuff like that.
And schools that aren't equipped to handle it.
Right.
So
well, they don't even know.
The schools aren't handling it.
Really,
the parents aren't involved in it.
Right.
And we're holding children to a very difficult standard, and then calling them monsters when they act exactly as the way you've conditioned them to act.
When they're just trying to keep the lights on for their mama and find some change in a car for some food, or, in my opinion, I hope nobody, I don't get injured for this, but there's when all that stuff was going on, there had to be some organized car theft ring happening.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, there's just no way.
There was way too many cars.
These people were getting paid money, big money, to steal cars.
I know. My wife was begging me to steal her car. I mean, she was leaving the keys on the dashboard practically.
Right.
She was what, nobody wants my car?
They were getting paid a lot of money to do that. I know this. I don't know who was paying them. I don't know who was running it, but I think that must have been dismantled at this point because I don't think we see as much of that happening.
I think ever since that Costco incident with, and then that old lady that was dragged.
Oh,
right. So that's another sin. Yes, I'm sorry.
It's
you
terrible.
don't get to.
No.
You have nothing to say in your defense other than be well, I didn't know she was going to die from it.
No.
It's that's actually what your defense is, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we get it. You didn't realize, partly because of your age,
Yeah.
And your inexperience, but there are outer limits of my sympathy.
Yeah.
But it does seem ever since then that we have kind of seen this big dip. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's still. I'm in Lakeview, and so I still get the pop-ups, and people are what we see is they're all breaking into cars in our neighborhoods looking for guns.
Right.
And I was talking to a friend, and he was saying that his neighbor's car had been broken into 5 times.
Right.
They broke into his pickup truck 5 times, and would you believe they've stolen 5 guns from him?
Get a gun safe, dude.
I was like, well, wait a second now. How many guns have you now put on the street? There should be a criminal penalty for that.
If I ran for mayor, I would never be elected again because I'd make so many people mad. I'm not running for mayor. I'm just saying, I would, or even city council, they need to pass an ordinance making it illegal for gun owners to not secure their guns. There's nothing wrong with having a gun.
Do you want to have a gun? Have a gun.
Great.
Secure your gun.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
Under the seat of your pickup truck is not secured, by the way, just in case you're unsure.
Right. They already know that Right.
Like it's not. You have a tell, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. So nobody is breaking into the Prius.
And they have gun safes. They have gun safes that go under your seat. Like you just put it under there,
right.
lock it up, and then
I have
pull
a
it
gun.
out.
I have guns. I have a safe. You know, nobody in my house knows. Even my wife does not know the code to the gun safe.
Right.
I
But you
tried.
gotta have
She didn't
protection, and there's nothing wrong with having protection. But you gotta lock it up.
And so as long as you continue to let these guns out on the street,
Yeah.
we're never gonna. We're not even gonna. We can't even have a discussion about how do we dig ourselves out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of brings me to like my next point, because this is something I wanted to talk about, and it's kind of self-promotion, but also it kind of, I have a tech company right now where we're building civil rights compliance software for schools.
Okay.
Schools and universities. And one of the things, our first module will be Title IX, because the whole thing started when Title IX started applying to K through 12 schools in 2020, and schools had no idea how to navigate any of that, right?
Right.
But another module that we're going to build out is special education. Like it started with Title IX, which really doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about. But as I started looking at the Office of Civil Rights in Washington, D.C., and all the complaints they get, Title VI complaints, ADA complaints, most of them are ADA complaints. And my child, has been diagnosed and had an IEP for a long time. So it's something I've become familiar with and personal. I decided like this was like an opportunity to try to get ahead of the problem instead of being a Band-Aid trying to fix what was going on the backside. I saw it as an opportunity to get in there and try to like give schools the tools they need to help these kids on the front end. So that's something that experience in juvenile court, and you're exactly right. With learning disabilities that are undiagnosed, they don't even know that they have learning disabilities.
No.
They just feel like they're stupid or whatever, because schools haven't historically had the resources to like even understand that. And there's also a whole stigma, I believe, in certain communities in New Orleans when it comes to like getting an IEP. It's like, it's like having a learning difference doesn't mean you have a low IQ. You know what I mean? Having an exceptionality just means you learn differently.
The big thing people talk about on social media now, right? If you can't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. Like everybody is different.
Yeah.
And these, my son got this question wrong on his test yesterday. Mm-hmm. What day is today? Today's Tuesday? I don't even know. All right, so yesterday. And he had to read his thing about airplanes.
Right.
And then he had to answer some questions. So the question is, and it says how jet engines suck in air. And so the question is, what do jet airplanes take in? So he circles people, and they're like, no, it's wrong. They take in air. And I was like, well, no, your question is inappropriately worded. The question you're trying to ask is, what do airplane jets take in?
Right.
Airplanes don't take in air. They take in people. Jets take in air.
Right.
And so he gets it wrong. He's like, oh, I got it wrong. And I was like, well, she's wrong.
Right.
They didn't. Now, you're in the first grade, so I'm not going to make like a big stink here, and I'm a lawyer, so I understand, like, you're not paying for this service, but it comes on the house. But I mean, you can't. There's a difference between, learning things differently doesn't mean that you're not intelligent.
Yeah.
His answer is technically, it's not even just like technically, no, technically, given the question asked, the answer is correct.
See, right.
If you wanted a different response, you should ask a different question.
See, that's exactly, I do that like when my child used to let me help with his homework, or if I'm helping him study for something, I say that at least 5 times. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, what? I don't know what they're asking, right? We should just write all the tests.
I can't wait till my kids won't let me help them with their homework.
Yeah,
like
well,
homework time
it'll
for
happen.
me is like,
Mine
oh
does
man,
not
I do
let
not
me help
like
him.
that.
I never get to see homework anymore. He's doing fine, so I guess it's okay.
There was like a fraction incident this year that really set some people off in my house, and there was a real division incident. And I was like, well, look, I was just taught a very old way to do math.
Right.
Like I said, like I was taught by nuns.
Yeah.
And I was like, and you and I guarantee, were probably taught the exact same way to do long division.
Yes,
There's one way to do long division.
Right.
He's doing. I don't know what they were doing. I was like, I would love to help you with this. Yeah. And if there is some course,
ChatGPT is really great for like helping you help your kids with math.
I should do that. I'll do ChatGPT sometimes.
Because you can put the thing in there and it'll solve it. You don't have to show them like so they cheat or anything, but you can at least learn how to solve it. So then you can like work through it with them. right? Or create a sample problem.
You're
and
right.
show them.
It's all about the prompt, right? So I could go like,
you just type in the problem and it'll solve the problem.
You're a school teacher teaching an adult.
You don't even have to do that.
How to explain this to a
You
child.
don't even have to do that. You just type in the problem and say solve it, and it'll solve it.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, so I do think if we're going to talk about criminal, the criminal aspect of New Orleans, it's not fair to say like drugs. I think it's missing an element. It's missing.
It's poverty.
It's poverty. It's broken families.
Yeah.
Right, because it's generational incarceration.
Right.
Right. So you put their fathers in prison
Right.
for the last 3 generations, and
Right.
and you were expecting then what result were you expecting from that?
Right.
Did you think
That's right. But there's also that is true when it comes to like
And then it's mental
impoverished
health.
people that are in the system and mental health. But I will tell you that I represent people from every walks of life. So I think that there's an assumption that all people that get in trouble with the criminal justice system are poor people, disenfranchised
right.
people. But the truth of the matter is, like, maybe it's because of my demographic or whatever, but the people that walk into my office, I get college professors, doctors, like, I get poor people that come in there with I get all kinds of people is my point. So something I've learned from doing this job for 20 plus years is that everybody is fallible.
Sure.
I think people that have never been in trouble with the law get this idea that there's us and them. There's people that break the law and people that don't. But there's
Right.
a whole slew of statutes that are negligent, where negligence is a factor, and where sometimes, simple thefts from people that don't need to steal because it's related to mental health. And, I think that there's every demographic in New Orleans has walked into my office with a criminal issue. So I think the idea that it's like poor people versus the haves and the have-nots, and that's always a criminal system, is not 100% accurate, at least in my experience.
No, you're highlighting what I often say to the new lawyers here. In that, similarly, I was like, I have represented people so poor they walk to the office.
Right.
And I've represented people who have multi-million-dollar homes.
Right.
And in the end, I've determined that they're all the same.
Yeah.
This person that has hired you, they all have similar problems.
Right.
They all have the same expectations that you would expect. Like, oh, it's different because you're rich. No, it's not.
Right.
Sometimes it's worse, right? But they're all the same. They all want the same type of communication, the same cadence of communication.
Right.
They all have the same concerns, fears, and doubts.
Yes.
They've all suffered the same injury.
Yeah.
And so you're right. I mean, in our world, there's probably not a week that goes by where I don't say that exact thing to everyone here. That's like, do not forget. Do not just assume that because this person's from this walk of life or this walk of life,
Right.
that the case is going to be handled differently, that they're going to have different expectations.
Right.
Now, it's all the same.
People that have money to hire, experts and do all this stuff, obviously their outcomes are oftentimes better than people that are poor and don't have the funds to do that.
That's what we're here for, right? So we hire. That's the hard part about being the plaintiff's lawyer. Is like, I'm funding it no matter what. So I pay for the experts. That's my job. And so the problem we have with and I can say this because I'm a lawyer. I'm an advertising lawyer. So
Right.
people are always like, those advertising lawyers. I'm always like, I know, right? Those guys are the worst. Or I hear a lot of, well, I don't have to advertise. I'm like, all right. We advertise. We're on TV.
Everybody has to advertise.
We advertise. Yeah, but we're like doing it like, the improper way. Not the improper way, like the distasteful way. So we advertise. But there's an expectation of results that certain advertisers use. And I don't do that style of advertising.
Right.
And the reason I don't do it is because it makes my life so much harder than it needs to be.
Right.
So if you see a billboard saying, I got $500,000, Justin got me $500,000,
Right.
It sets an expectation. And so I've had clients be like, well, why aren't you going to hire an expert for this? And I'm like, are you nuts?
Right.
I'm not. You can't hire an expert for this.
Right.
This case is terrible. I'm trying to tell you, we're. I'm doing my best here, because sometimes a case will come in the door. Look, I see a case come in the door, and you think, oh my goodness, this is going to be the best case ever.
Right.
And it is crap. You just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
And then sometimes a case comes in the door, and you're thinking, I don't know, that's probably not the best case, but maybe it's a slow intake month, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're just like, I'm feeling desperate. Come on in.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
help you
yeah,
out,
yeah, yeah.
right? And then that case ends up becoming like this really big case where you don't realize it because you don't have all the facts. You know, you're just hearing that first glimpse of the case. And again, clients, no matter what their walk of life, are not good historians. They're not able to articulate all the details of their case. They don't even understand it. All they know is they need a lawyer.
Right.
And so, so you never know what it's going to be. So you have a case, and it's like, okay, well. So here's some news about your case today. Your case is actually no good. So
Right.
got new evidence. Turns
Yeah.
out your case sucks. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but better me than anyone else, right?
Right.
And they're like, well, you got to go hire an expert. And I was like, well, here's where you and I are going to differ on this.
Yeah, right.
I was like, I'm not going to go spend $20,000 for an expert for this. But part of that advertising is what, you know, creates that problem, is that they don't understand what had to happen for that $500,000.
Right.
So what sort of injuries or what surgery
and
that
then you
person
have
had.
to qualify it when you meet with them, because the
And
ethics
what do they
rules.
get?
The ethics rules require that you say, just because that happened in this case, it's not going to happen
Right.
in your case. As a criminal lawyer, people always ask me, and after doing this for 30 years, like, they want to know what the outcome's going to be. I'm like, I'm not the decision maker. I can tell you based on my experience, this is what I've seen happen in cases.
Or you're in
how
St.
many
Tammany,
cases-
not Orleans.
How many
right?
cases have I actually would rather be in St. Tammany
Really?
than
Okay.
Orleans. Sorry, Jason. Yeah, I would. I actually like them because they're seasoned, and they're my peers, and we can have a conversation and be
have
on the
like a-
same place,
that
same
makes
level of
sense.
experience.
Right.
Easier to deal with for me. I think there's a lot of very nice people that work in Orleans Parish, and they're exactly where I was when I was in Orleans Parish, fresh out of law school and learning. A lot of very kind lawyers over there, but there's still like a learning curve, right? So you have to get them to trust you because they don't know you, you know? And I'm like, you know, dealing, you know, it's just a lot of extra layers.
Yeah. Well, if you can peel away some of those extraneous issues,
Yeah.
then you can just have like a very frank conversation with
Yeah.
someone and who is a prosecutor or a defense counsel.
Right.
So we have that. I was a defense lawyer for a long. Everybody here was a former defense lawyer. That's our thing. Like, I
Yeah.
won't hire someone who hasn't done it.
Yeah.
And so I can have a very frank conversation with them. Like, look,
Yes.
you know, and I know, and you know, but look, this is where we are.
Right.
So, like, if your client wants to get through with this, like, we can. If you don't, like, that's okay too. Like,
Right.
we'll just keep trudging along, but we can skip all the, you know, the nonsense. And
Right.
it helps.
Yeah.
It helps the client.
Yeah.
It helps you.
Yeah,
Right? 'Cause I
and
don't have
that's
to
just
go
who
through
I
all
am
that.
as a person. Like, I'm just very, like, I really get to know my clients. I really do try to figure out how they ended up where they are, and I really do try to come up with creative solutions that'll make everybody happy and maybe kind of make sure this doesn't happen again, which maybe is an extra step. Not every client is for me. Some clients don't want that. I
Right.
tell them ahead of time, this is what you get with me. If you don't want it, I'm not your lawyer, because I don't like repeat clients. I like to help people like move on with their life and like get past it, but I don't like people that just keep doing the same thing over and over.
Sure. Right. Well, because then, right.
I
get
feel
that
like I'm
too.
wasting my time. I mean,
Right.
it's just,
I had a client once. He said, you know, he was like, well, I was, you know, in prison. I was like, what were you in prison for? He's like, well, 3 counts of attempted murder. I was like, 3 counts of attempted murder? So you 3 separate times you tried to murder someone and failed? Do you think that
probably one
perhaps?
case, right.
I was like, do you think that perhaps maybe you should find a different line of work because it seems like you're not very good at murdering people?
Yeah, right.
He's like, I'm Mr. Justin. That's just rude. And I was like, well, I'm just telling you, go do something else. If you
Right.
you couldn't even murder someone, you can't even get that right. No, I'm
Right.
kidding. But
No, right.
you know, but so well, here I got the fingers, the showbiz fingers, which tells me I went on too long. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. It was
Tell
fun.
everybody where they can find you.
so I am now at the IP building at 643 Magazine Street.
43. And so if you're out there, you're listening, maybe you messed up, maybe, you know, maybe it's your fault, maybe it's not your fault, maybe you need some help, you know, do they look you up online or
Sure,
call you?
they can find me online.
All right.
504-529-3774.
There you go, 3774. So, well, hey, thank you so much. I
you.
appreciate it.
It was
great
lovely meeting you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me today on Above the Legal Limit. If you enjoyed the show and you want to hear more about business and law, hit that subscribe button. If you didn't like the show, keep it to yourself. Remember, there's no limit to what we can achieve. We will see you next week. Until then, even though we're above the legal limit, let's drive safely. Cheers, everyone.